Brian, good morning.
Hey, Brian, how are you?
Good. How you, Jim?
Good, thanks.
Hey, let me ask you a question. Were you opposed to that printing of the salaries in the telegram?
Was I opposed to it?
Yeah.
No, I wasn't opposed to it. Here's what I didn't like about it. Police officers make a lot of money in overtime doing private details. Now, those private details can be for the city, but primarily they are for utility companies, package stores, supermarkets, bars, things like that. I would rather see them carve that out. Show it to me, but carve it out and then tell me who the top 250 wage earners are in the city of Worcester. Then I think you're comparing apples to apples. But go ahead, Brian.
No, Jordan, I had a disagreement with Jordan last night about that. I think we have every right to know what these people are making. But I think it's coming to the point, Jim, where you have to look at the structure of how they're paid. And believe me, I'm a firm believer in police details. Someone called last night and made reference to having flagmen in the city. Well, you just couldn't do that. I mean, we did a project on Cambridge Street in Worcester.
Mm-hmm.
On a day there were 3 funerals, and everything went without a hitch. And that was,
wow. That's a nightmare.
Great respect for the detailed officers we had. But I think you have to look at the structure of how it's paid because, Jim O'Day, what Jim O'Day is saying, if you're successful and you make more money, you're going to be taxed more.
Yeah, Brian, let me just stop you there. Let me ask you a question, Brian, without revealing all of your personal information, because you've called before. So at some point in your life, you decided to start a business, didn't you?
Well, I work for somebody, to be honest with you.
Okay.
But
right,
I work hard.
Let's talk about, well, hold on a second. Let's talk about that person you work for. At some point, that person decided to start a business, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Now, by starting a business, you don't get them for free. So they had to go out and probably get some money, borrow some money, right?
Exactly.
Right. They had to pay that person for borrowing that money, and then they were on the hook for that money. And they had to work hard and be successful so that they could get to the point where they could pay back that debt, they could have a sufficient cash flow, and then they could earn a good living for themselves, provide a living for others, and by the way, should be able to be paid handsomely because they decided to go out and take a risk that could have ruined them financially for the rest of their lives, right?
Absolutely, Jim.
And they created a job for you.
They took a risk. They put up, the money and took a risk. And we are being taxed to death. And, if you saw 60 Minutes, the United States has the highest corporate tax rate in the world.
Right.
And, if you saw that piece on Cisco, they have almost $1 trillion they'd like to bring back into this country, but they can't.
Right.
So why aren't the legislators looking at restructuring the corporate tax rate to give an incentive to someone to start a business?
You're
right.
That doesn't work with their plan.
They're pigs. They want it all for themselves. They're not willing to take cuts. And in tough times, everyone has to take a cut. As hurtful as it is, they have to. My insurance went up. I have to pay more. I mean, it's just,
I do too.
I had to cut back on the way I spend and save. I mean, it's just inevitable in this climate. But this Jim O'Day, he's way out of touch with everyone.
Well, he's never... Look, it's one thing to start your own business.
Right.
Then the other part of it is, it's one thing to work for a private entity where you have to produce every day, where if the business isn't profitable, you're gone. Absolutely. He doesn't understand that. He worked as a social worker. Okay, right. He probably wasn't paid very well, fine. But he worked as a social worker. He wasn't worrying about his job going away. I worry every single day about my job going away. Every single day. And I bet you do too.
I do too. I mean, if I don't produce and the company is not profitable, then they'll look at other avenues. Either I'm replaced or the company shuts down. It's
right.
As simple as that.
Exactly. And if somebody continues to disincentivize the person who is responsible for the company I work for, I want that person to stop, because you're not sticking it to the rich guy. You're not sticking it to them. You're trying to redistribute wealth. And as Tina said, can you imagine somebody saying you don't deserve to make more than $500,000 a year?
I mean, it's
where does that come from? Seriously.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Jim. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, this guy is out of touch. He's out of touch. They want everyone to be the same. You know, I don't mind helping somebody, but let's look at other. Let's look at the fraud that goes on in the state.
Yeah.
In SSI. Let's look at who has ever looked into that. I see it every single day.
They don't want to do it. They don't want to do it. That's an easy place to get votes. They've got active groups like, look, you and I said this to the Tea Party the first year they had a rally at Lincoln Square and they asked me to speak. And I said, you know what? You spare the rod, you spoil the child. If you don't pay attention to a child, that child develops bad behavior. And then eventually when that behavior gets out of hand, you wake up and realize it and you say, we've got to do something about this kid. Well, sometimes it's too late. Well, Brian, you and I are busy. I mean, we work all day. We're not involved in a quasi-public-private organization, or we don't work for the government. We don't have time to get involved in these things. So guess what? The people who do have time have been influencing it for far too long. That's what the Tea Party movement was about. It's time for us to wake up and say, whoa, we have let this kid run wild for years. It's time to straighten him out.
Absolutely, and I challenge Representative O'Day to come on the show because I'd like to ask him some questions.
He won't.
Representative O'Day, if you're listening, we'd love to have you on the show.
Well, listen, he won't. And look, I know I have a reputation for name calling, sometimes personal attacks. I throw elbows. You know what? That's all in fun. But let me tell you something. When it comes to a serious discussion, nobody does it better than me. He wants to come on the show and have a serious discussion, but that's all right. He's writing back to people who wrote him letters who talked about what we discussed on this show and said, you're not learning anything from that. I can't talk to you if you're listening to that. You heard what he said to Tina. Well, then move out of the state if you don't like it. No, Jim, you get out of office, you fat slob, and earn a living.
Okay, Jim. Thanks a million. I appreciate it.
Thanks for getting me fired up, Brian. You have a good day. What a good guy Brian is. All right.